Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College, a program that encourages discussion in our community on today's local and global issues. Now your host for Conversations from St. Norbert College, author, professor, and nationally known sports economist, Dr. Kevin Quinn.
Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College. Our special guest is Aaron Taylor, a former Packers player and current CBS college football analyst. We'll discuss Aaron's football career with the Packers and what keeps his interest off the field these days. Aaron, welcome to the program and welcome back to Green Bay.
Thank you. It's always good to come back home.
Yeah, so this was your home for a number of years, right?
It was. I lived actually here in De Pere when I played for the Packers on Good Hope Road, North Good Hope Road.
Oh, sure.
So I'm familiar with the area, St. Norbert's and certainly De Pere, but just the people and the weather. It's a beautiful early summer day going on right now, so it feels really good to be back, but more than anything, it's good to be back with these people.
Well, you grew up in Southern California, or Northern California, right? Is
Yep.
that right? And you didn't have quite the snowstorms there that you get here occasionally, right?
No, I didn't. But I was already used to the weather from, spending 4 years on the campus of Notre Dame prior to that. So I was a little bit indoctrinated by the time that I got here in Wisconsin for the weather, but you can't tell with a day like today. It's been beautiful.
Yeah. Now, you played in the NFC Championship game against the Carolina Panthers here, is that right? I was in the stands. If you were half as cold as I was, you were pretty cold.
It was unbelievably cold. And one of my favorite moments from that game, I mean, anytime it's cold for an offensive lineman, that is good times because it slows everything down. The defensive linemen that are super quick and running around, they get slow. And I remember Greg Lloyd, the linebacker, and he was like an 8-time world champion black belt guy. And after a play, I jacked him up a little bit, and he came at me, and I kind of did the flying crane on him and gave him the crazy look like that. So everybody in the huddle starts cracking up, and we laughing. But every time I think of that NFC Championship game, I think cold, and I think Karate Kid.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your football career, and then maybe the fun stuff, which is the analyst stuff. But you were a star at Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. And why did you choose Notre Dame? You must have had your choice of any place in the country, really.
I did, and humbly, like a lot of kids that had successful high school careers, I could have went anywhere that I went, but at the time, graduating was important to me. So Notre Dame graduated 97% of its athletes back then, and I wasn't the best student, but I knew I wasn't 3%. So there was probably a pretty good job or a chance that if I had, went there, that I would have a college degree. But on my recruiting trip, something viscerally inside my bones told me that was the right place for me. I liked the type of people. I liked the values that it represented. And I think, truth be told, it really reminded me of my high school, which is De La Salle High School, another Catholic school. So a lot of similarities between the two. And there was something that felt very similar to the way it felt here. When you get here, it's just something, it feels comfortable and feels familiar.
Maybe one of the main reasons why was you played for the legendary Lou Holtz.
Yeah, Lou Holtz. I mean, he did an unbelievable job of being a teacher and teaching us how to be successful men and brothers and sons and fathers, while also teaching us how to play the game of football. I mean, he's a world-renowned speaker. I don't know how much money he gets to go in and talk to corporations about, leadership and teamwork and those sort of things, but we got that every day for free. When I arrived on campus, we were 2 years removed from a national championship. We had just signed the NBC contract, which was unprecedented at the time. Now it's pretty commonplace for teams and universities and conferences to have television contracts in place. But it was just a good time to be there. And there was something about him, and he, gave me the recruiting pitch. Aaron Taylor, by the time you leave Notre Dame, I want you to be one of the best tackles that's ever played here. I see a captain in you. Man, hook, line, and sinker. I'm like, okay, coach, let me sign up. So on my recruiting trip.
Oh, my.
I didn't sign, obviously, my letter of intent, but I gave my commitment. And I think of the 26 guys that were on that recruiting trip, that first one, which was their marquee guys that they targeted, I think 20 of us signed. And we all got along, and I remember riding in the car with a guy by the name of Dean Lytle, who was from North Carolina, and I had never met anybody from North Carolina, but Dean was a cool guy, and we just kind of all gelled right away, and we had a special 4 years there.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, you did become a captain your senior year, if I'm not mistaken, right? You had incredible success, football-wise, when you were there. You played in some bowl games, right? Can you remember the bowl games?
Oh, yeah. I remember them fondly. It was the orange sugar and the cotton and cotton. And I remember the Orange Bowl, there was a very controversial play with Rocket Ismail that returned a punt return for a touchdown that got called back for a phantom clip.
I remember that.
Now, we've argued that over the years, but I mean, that's a call that you can't make. But, you know, there's also an argument that it could be. Maybe the first time I've ever admitted that publicly. But, then we played Florida my sophomore year, and I was starting by then as a true sophomore. And I remember the two plays we gashed them on in the second half where we took the game over was 60 trap. I mean, the basic football high school play, backside guard pulls, kicks out, gets right up the A-gap through the heart of the defense, and they were doing a lot of stunting and twisting. So we made some adjustments there, and I mean, it's Jerome Bettis. I mean, he has been a Hall of Fame NFL career. We were just sophomores, 18, 19 years old. And then we played in 2 back-to-back Cotton Bowls against Texas A&M and won both of those. So I was 3-1 in bowls, and I think after that first loss my true freshman year, we won 3 straight.
Well, you played, I remember, some legendary games with Boston College during that time. In fact, one might have been at Boston College. It was going back and forth, and I think it was one on a field goal at the end. Is that?
Yeah, the facts I've tried to repress about that because the week before we played Florida State, and that was a team with Charlie Ward, who won the Heisman Trophy that year, Derek Alexander, Derek Brooks, who was NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year and a Hall of Famer in his own right, and William Floyd. I mean, they just were stacked with talent. Warwick Dunn was on that team, man. But we ended up beating them in South Bend, and they were number 1 at the time, and we were number 2. So we jumped them the next week in the polls, and we were celebrating, and we actually got Boston College at home. And
That's right.
I just think we were too excited and we weren't focused enough. And Boston College was a good team, but we should have beat them. And we had our opportunities, but at the end of the day, they made more plays than we did, and they actually won on a walk-off field goal, essentially. And I mean, it was a buy-on kicker. I think the Boston Whalers' son was, the guy that kicked it. And what a heartbreaking loss.
You're at Notre Dame. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than big time there. You obviously had a real college student experience being there. But so how was your experience different than maybe the average Notre Dame student?
The expectations and just the activity level. And that was always most pronounced after the season. Like after the regular season and before spring ball started, we were normal students. We would lift in the morning, then we'd go to class, and we'd be done at like 1:30, and you'd look around and be like, what do we do now? You guys get this free time all the time? Like I can go take a nap, eat, play some video games, take another nap, and then go study? It was amazing how much time, and back then that was prior to the 20-hour rule, which gets taken advantage of probably at this point. But for us, it was, what I liked about the experience was we were forced to assimilate with the regular student body as true freshmen. We had to live in the dorms as a normal person, if you will, and then stay in the dorms. We could choose our roommates our sophomore, junior, and senior year, but that really gave us the academic side. It gave us a true student side. We didn't have Greek life, so when you're looking at a school of 8,000 undergrad students, it's like a glorified high school. So you get really close to the guys on your floor, and I like that. These athletic dorms that have come online now that a lot of schools have, and it's become the arms race in a lot of ways with, the facilities and those sort of things. Although they're nice, I think it robs sometimes student athletes from the student aspect of what it is they do while they're on campus, and I certainly got that while I was at Notre Dame.
So you were team captain, you were All-American twice, that had to be pretty fun, Lombardi Award winner, Jim Parker Award, and the Nick Petrosani Award, which I had not, Sante Award. So tell me about those and what they mean to you, what they meant then and what they mean to you now.
Well, winning awards is special, but I just think they're a reflection of how I showed up as a member of the team. The Nick Petrosani Award, that's essentially a leadership award that's voted on by the players, and people, pick who they want to have this thing. And I'm humbled by all the stuff that I accomplished, realizing that everybody worked hard. I was a hard worker, but everybody worked hard, but I just kept getting better and better and better. And my whole thing was just to do the best I could. And I've always been inherently a team-oriented person. I gravitate towards that, and I don't know if that's because I've always been kind of a chubby fat guy and I had no other choice but to play offensive line or what the deal was, but
you weren't returning kicks?
No returning kicks. And, people ask me all the time, you ever score a touchdown? I'm like, man, I don't want that pressure. Let me just block. Let me move people out of the way from point A to point B and let the other guys get the glory. But I appreciate those things now more than ever when I look back, and winning the Lombardi Award, which is basically the Heisman for fat guys, right?
I've never heard it said that way. But,
it's a very apt description of it. But those are great things. But when I think back of my college career, I don't think about the awards dinner. And Mel Kiper was the MC that night that I won the Lombardi. Forrest Gregg presented me the award. Right, so I'm winning the Lombardi Trophy. I later get drafted to Green Bay and then play in Lambeau Field. I mean, it was kind of a weird, crazy time. But the reality is, when I think back on my time, I think of my teammates, and I think of the bus rides home, and I think of all the ways we tried to figure out we're going to cut Coach Holtz's brake lines, or put gas in his or sugar in his gas tank, and like all the crazy stuff that you think about as 17, 18, 19-year-olds. But at the end of the day, football's a people game, and that's what I miss the most. And the awards are nice, but they're not nearly as meaningful to me as the memories and experiences I shared with my guys.
Well, you were on top of the world. This is 94, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, on top of the world, you get drafted in the first round. And I was telling you earlier that I went and looked back at some of the names that were in that draft, and I mean, holy cow, yeah. that was a talent-laden draft. And then, I don't know if it was the first time you had to experience something like this, but something happened in June right after you were drafted.
Yeah, I ruptured my right patella tendon, and it was June 6, 1994. I think probably 10:34 a.m., not that I remember it. That was devastating to me. I'd never missed a down in college. There was a lot of expectations. They brought me in as a first-round offensive pick to be able to protect some guy by the name of Brett Favre, and they traded up from Miami for picks to get me. So there was a lot of expectations, and I had a lot on myself. And then to get hurt in shorts and miss the entire year, and I mean, I was still in denial a little bit after it happened, because I go down and my kneecap rips, and it's not attached to anything, so my quad lollipops up, and like it's this weird looking thing, and I'm like, ah! So Pat McKenzie, who's still the orthopedic surgeon, doctor, comes over. I said, "Shoot me straight, Pat. Is it bad?" He almost starts laughing. Goes, "Yeah, it's bad. Are you kidding me?" And he was a huge Notre Dame fan. I remember meeting him at the combine, and signed some autographs for his kids because they were big Notre Dame fans. And that was one of the darkest times in my life, because there I was at the threshold of my dreams, and the rugs snatched from underneath me, and my world stopped, and they moved the drill 10 yards. And then the next day, Guy McIntyre got flown in to replace me, and Guy was a guy that I watched as a kid, being a 49er fan growing up. So here I am on the threshold of realizing my dream, and I'm replaced by a guy that I watched as a kid. It was amongst the most surreal and darkest times I've ever been through.
But, I mean, you did go through, which is a tough rehab. You were out the whole year, right?
Yeah, I was out the whole year on IR. Come back, play the whole next season. First round of the playoffs against Atlanta, going against Jumpy Geathers right before halftime. Pow! Same injury, other knee. And at that point, it really was like, man, maybe I'm supposed to go do something else. I couldn't believe what had gone on for me, that my body that had been my tool and my weapon all those years was failing me already at the age of 22, and put a real damper on my career. But I always look back at that time and appreciate what happened. And I couldn't see it then, but I appreciate now that it shortened my career, which speeded up the ability for me to get out to the world and do some other things.
But I mean, despite that, you started almost every game except for that first year for your whole career. Even you played a couple years in San Diego, which had to be a dream compared to Green Bay, at least from the weather point of view.
Yeah, from some aspects, yeah.
But of course, you were part of what was one of the great Green Bay teams. And it's hard for people to imagine now, but before people like you got there, before people like Brett Favre, before the former Reggie White got there, Sean Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a little bit. It was, I don't know, 2-3 decades of some trouble, and you got to be part of this resurgence of the Packers. So what was that like?
It was surreal. Like, I think the fundamental aspect of teamwork is trust. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything, because I think trust says that in the inevitable moments of adversity, I know that you're going to be there for me. So we had a locker room that was built upon trust, and we were committed and we were accountable. We had a competitive culture, yet we walked the fine line between being confident and being humble. There weren't a lot of egos. We played with ego, but I think what separated us was the leadership we had on the defensive side with Reggie, the talent that we had on the offensive side, and the leadership with Brett Favre. And everybody else in between. Frankie Winters as our center was the smartest football player I've ever been around. He used to tell what, Brett should check in and get out of. I mean, he was a brilliant player. But for us to be successful, you got to be talented, you got to be good, and you got to be a little bit lucky. But I think the fundamental element of that time, of that team, was that we cared about each other. And because we had that trust and all those other things I mentioned, it allowed us in those times of adversity to know who we were and go to realize that. And it still to this day is among the best things I've ever done.
I didn't grow up as a Packer fan, but it was just a joy watching that team play. And so I've been told that media day at the Super Bowl is just a zoo.
Yeah.
So here you are, right? It's your second full season that you've been able to play with the team, and you're in New Orleans, right?
We're in New Orleans, and it's the tail end of this 2 weeks of just chaos. You kind of practice your first week at home to get your work done, and then you're very much warned that when you go down to the Super Bowl, all bets are off. It's about who can stay the most focused because, nothing's going to change in that second week of practice. We had Don Beebe on our team, and we had Jim McMahon, and those were the only two players that had any sort of Super Bowl experience. So Coach Holmgren had those guys come up and kind of coach us up on what was going to go on. And one of those was how crazy media day was. So I remember we had this guy, Mike Counter, who used to work for Channel 2.
I've heard of this guy.
Local sportscaster, real kind of scrawny guy. Had a widow's peak back in the day, looked like Eddie Munster. He's lost all of his hair now, interestingly, now that he's in his 50s.
By the way, Mike is our producer and is standing right here.
Oh, hey, Mike, how you doing? What's up?
Yeah, I've heard about this guy. He was trouble.
Yeah, he was trouble. But there was so much distraction that there was an interview where, he was like, hey, I got to go do my job. I'm like, no, man, you got to stay here and protect us. And it was me and Santana Dotson and a couple other guys. So we kind of did like a little reverse skit where I became the interviewer and he was the interviewee. And I asked him all the dumb questions that we were getting asked.
You wish you had more free time?
That's a dumb question. I've been answering dumb questions all day long at this press conference, and I'm tired of it.
Cut. Back to you.
But, so you're playing in a Super Bowl, and it's got to take a series before you just kind of settle down and say, okay, it's Super Bowl, but I'm playing football here. And, of course, it was a great win for the Packers, so that must have been fun.
Man, let me tell you what. I have never been so tired in my life in pregame. That was one of the things that Jim and Don said was like, hey, man, it's a Super Bowl. Everybody's going to be excited. You're going to be running around like crazy. You really have to conserve your energy. So you get ZZ Tops playing, and you got fireworks and smoke going on. It was the most abnormal, out-of-the-ordinary experience we'd ever had. And true to form, man, the first couple downs and in pregame, everybody's running around. And I remember on that first drive, we had the ball. We had like 7, 8, 10 plays, whatever it was, and there was a TV timeout. And I look over, I look at Frank Winters, I'm like, are you tired? He's like, yeah. I'm like, me too, I can't breathe. So we got to settle down here. The speed of that game is unlike any other I'd ever played in. There's being around the game as long as I have, there's different speeds that the game can be played at. And you don't know that until you carry on and proceed to play on the different levels. So the high school level, and then the college level at practice, and then a regular game, then a bowl game. Then you get here in preseason, then there's regular season, then there's the playoffs, the Super Bowl. I remember there were some third down situations where New England blitzed us and Denver blitzed us in Super Bowl 32, where it happened so fast, I couldn't tell you what happened, but I just kind of came off and exchanged our blocks, and everybody ended up getting blocked. We'd come to the sidelines and look at the pictures and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even see that guy. And it was about reacting, and that's what I think championship teams do. You drill and you drill and you drill and you drill and you prepare. So when you get out there, you don't think, you just react. But it was a surreal experience, and of course we go on to win Super Bowl 31, and at the very end of the game, the confetti starts coming down. And I remember we were on the field, right? So we got to kneel out and run out the clock on a 4-minute offense. As an offensive player, that's what you want. And I remember the confetti coming down, and I didn't know what to do. It was like, is this it? Like, there's no next week? There's no, hey, good job, we're one step closer? Like, we did it? There's nothing else? Like, we got all excited, and there's a NFL Films video of me kind of twirling around and, with my arms in the air, just looking up at the confetti, because it really was that visceral reaction of elation where we had finally arrived on the mountaintop. And I got tingles talking about it right now. And I mean, this is the ring we won, man.
That's an impressive ring.
This is it. And
that is impressive. As
good as we were, as hard as I worked and all those things, the reality was I was at the right place at the right time with the right guys. That if I had gotten drafted one spot higher or one spot lower, I wouldn't have this ring. But more than this ring is a symbol of the experience, and not about what we accomplished, but who we became in that process. And that, to me, is what's most valuable about my time here.
You know, anybody who's under the age of 25 or 30 can't even imagine a time when the Packers weren't good. And you probably remember the bus trip, right? It was supposed to be a 2-hour bus trip that took about 6 hours. It was so cold. Oh my God! And there were people on the street. It looked like the liberation of Kuwait City here in town.
We were taking all our clothes out of our roller bags and putting 2 suit coats on and all the pants and the socks we had. It was an absolute disaster from a logistical standpoint. But I think the only thing that allowed us to get through with it is that we were so happy that we won. And the fans, true to form, man, they showed up. They were prepared, a little bit better dressed than we were, but I remember kind of the speech that Reggie White gave. Thank you, Green Bay. And then we all ran inside and jumped in the hot tub.
Just judging as a spectator, the fans may have had a little more antifreeze in them than you guys did.
Maybe. Well, we might have some antifreeze in us too now.
Well, I think one of the things, apart from your great career, I think one of the things that you should be proudest about is what you've managed to do since. You know, so you're now an analyst with CBS Sports. You do college football. I mean, you're probably more recognized doing that than you ever were as an offensive lineman in some ways, right? I mean, young people know you only as the TV guy.
Yeah.
That's got to be kind of cool.
It's interesting, it's cool, it's surreal, and it's all the above. And I think what's so hard when we transition as athletes is, A, we lose a significant income, right? But we also lose our identity, we lose our sense of significance, and more importantly, our purpose. And we're lucky because we have all of that wrapped up into one thing, and it's a job and an occupation. So a lot of us, I think, make the mistake of going out to find another job thinking it's going to replace those things. I, somewhere along the process, struggled mightily, like most people do when they retire, but I found a way to kind of get back up on my feet and get my personal life together, and that involved employment. And I went back to grad school and got my multi-subject teaching credential. I was going to teach elementary school, and then TV called, and I decided to do that. But I went to Sri Lanka after the tsunami and did some service work there. I taught English down in South America for 6 months. I backpacked through Europe and did some service work there. That purpose piece and that significance piece. How do I make a difference? How do I know that I matter? How do I improve the outcomes and the experience of not only myself but of the world around me? Football provided very quick and distinct answers to that, and I think it took me a long time to figure out what that was, maybe 10 years or so after I retired. So it's funny when you were saying how successful I was, the TV part is a small part of it, but my role as a father, my role as a dedicated and committed husband in a marriage that gets better by the years, not worse. Thank God my wife is patient and a poor judge of character.
I say the same about my wife.
But the TV part's fun, man. It gives me an income, right? It gives me a ton of flexibility, but it's a means to an end. It's not my entire life. It's what allows me to be a stay-at-home dad, 5.5, 6 months out of the year when I'm not traveling on the road. So I'm part of games and picnics and school plays and pancake breakfasts and all that sort of stuff. But the football, man, again, it's a people game. Like, I don't miss Saturdays and Sundays. I miss the stuff around it and the bus rides and all those memories. So when I'm out on the road calling games, I get an opportunity to do that. When I go down to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, that Phil Savage has done a remarkable job with, it's like a high school, college, and NFL reunion. I see guys I haven't seen for 20 years, and there's an instant bond and pickup from where we left off. So I was talking to my wife the other day, and she said, man, football really is the gift that keeps on giving. And she summed it up perfectly. I truly do feel that way, and I feel super blessed that, people want to listen to me on TV and that I've got a job and can talk about a game that's meant so much to me.
Well, I couldn't help but think when you were talking about what you were doing right after football, that your experience at Notre Dame, I'd like to think we do this here at St. Norbert, that we center people, they don't even know it. They're 22 years old. They don't even know that this is what they're getting, but they recognize there's more to life than just me.
That's right.
And I'd like to think we're doing that. So I want to ask, to me, your analyst job has got to be the coolest job in the world, right? So How do you prepare? I mean, what does your week look like?
It's a lot more involved than I think people think. I probably spend 40, 50 hours of watching film, calling coaches, doing research, something that directly relates to the game. There's a lot of travel involved. There's a lot more prep behind the scenes than I think the average casual fan recognizes, because they just hear us up there giving our opinions, but those opinions are based upon a ton amount of research and relationships and things that we do behind the scenes. But it's fun. Like, when you enjoy what you're doing, it's not work. Well, that ain't work for us. We just up there talking ball and having some fun. In college football, there's 126 now, maybe 124 teams with, Idaho stepping down. I think Eastern Illinois maybe stepped down recently. But it's a ton of work. But I get to work with Rick Neuheisel, who's, had a great college career as a coach, and Adam Zucker, who I think is a rising star in the business, Brian Jones and Randy Cross, who are good friends and great analysts, Carter Blackburn, who I think is another young rising star and's got a bright future of him with play-by-play. He's my guy that I work with when I'm on the road calling games. The road games it's a concert of 70 people. Each has an individual job that all are related, dependent upon each other in one way or another, and it's controlled chaos. The things that go on beyond the scenes, what people don't know when they're watching games is, if I say, and what allowed that play to go is the bad footwork here by the left guard, da-da-da-da-da. As soon as Carter picks up and he's talking, I'm talking to the producer in the truck, telling him the replay angle I want to see. Hey, mark that play. Let's build a package coming out of the next commercial. It is constant communication going back and forth, and the learning curve was very steep at first, and it's starting to flatten out a little bit for me, but sometimes it moves pretty fast up there.
And I'm amazed at how much work must go in. I'm guessing that folks fly in on Wednesday or Thursday. You have a pile of interviews you have to do. Mm-hmm. You have to learn the culture, the history, and all that sort of thing of a different team pretty much every week, I'm guessing. And, you have to remember the stats. You have to watch the film. I think it's an incredible amount of work to have to do.
It's crazy. When I'm in the studio, we have to know a little bit about everybody. When you're on the road, you got to know everything about those two teams. And realizing that there are people that only watch those two teams or their particular team that's in that game all season long. So you have to know the history of what happened in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. You have to be able to tie in the topical relevant stuff and the coaching changes and the administrative stuff that goes on behind the scene. Hopefully you have a good game and you follow the game and let the game tell the story. But sometimes you got to carry it and figure out when to...
59-3 and it's the second quarter.
Okay, we're earning our money today, Carter.
So where'd you eat last night?
Exactly.
When you're ready to retire, what does retirement look like?
Well, it's interesting. I'd like to think that I retired once, and I didn't handle it well. And I made the mistake of thinking I was going to be retired. I think we all get this false sense of security that when it's done, man, I'm a hunt and fish and golf, right? And life's going to be good. But I think as people, and I think certainly as a man, as somebody that's been a high achiever, life is about purpose. And I don't care whether I'm earning a paycheck to do something that makes a difference or not. But I'm going to do something. So retirement to me looks like being actively engaged and giving back to the world that's given so much to me. So I do that with football. It's an exchange of my knowledge of the game, and they compensate me with revenue that allows me to do other things. But if I ever am not on air doing something else, you'll find me being of service somewhere, somehow, some way, because that's what I've always been, and that's always what's happened to me. I've been the beneficiary my entire life of teamwork and generosity, and it's been part of who I am to some way, somehow try and give that back in a little way.
Well, that's a great place to be. You said hunting. Now, you grew up around San Francisco.
Yeah.
I don't know that as the hunting capital of the world.
You hunt different things there, but it's a similar concept.
Like for a really good Pinot.
Yeah, pretty much. Go to North Beach and get some good Italian food.
I actually, we have to close, but I actually found at the town you're from, Concord, right, or you went to high school, that's the birthplace of Tom Hanks.
Oh.
And it was once home to Star Wars Mark Hamill.
Oh, look at that.
So there you go.
No, nerd alert. I like it.
So, when you're back hanging with the Chamber of Commerce, you can always check it out.
Tom Hanks, Mark Hamill.
Anyway, thank you so much for doing this, and thanks for coming to St. Norbert, and I hope that you're enjoying the experience here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Man.
I've really enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed our show as much as I have. This is a fun one. Until next time, I'm Kevin Quinn. Best wishes for good conversations from St. Norbert College.